Prosecutor Jeremy Saland. Jeremy, good to see you this morning. So talk to me about this judge pausing this buyout offer deadline, extending it to Monday. What's behind it? Obviously, there's questions clearly about its legality.
Right. So multiple unions, I think maybe 3 or 4 of them said, hey, before you go forward, I don't think you can do it. Setting aside what the uncertainty that it creates and the issues that it sort of arbitrarily done, it could run afoul of what's called the Administrative Procedure Act, which sets forth the way these things can happen. So they're saying you can't do that. For example, how is the federal government that only gets funding through March or through March 14th, I believe, going to guarantee payments, for example, way out in September when that has yet to be approved? So Trump administration, you cannot do this and put these people in jeopardy. And who's going to come in and take care of things? Social security checks, national security. How are we going to implement and do the job that we're supposed to do?
So what do you expect then to happen tomorrow?
You know, always expecting and understanding what the federal courts will do is difficult, but I would not expect that all of a sudden that the judge is going to say, you have adhered with this policy and this rule that I just mentioned before, that you can do what you want, Trump administration. 60,000+ people, and arguably more because it extended that period of time, can now resign. And keep in mind, there's a new oath or requirement of reliability and loyalty that they have to accept. There could be future furloughs. There could be future firing as the government tries to shrink its structure and what it has in place now under Trump's policy. So I would expect that it's not going to go forward. But, you know, listen, a lot of different things happen. And we've seen Trump try again to implement, for example, an EO on the 14th Amendment. So he's been struck down or paused, and I would expect this to remain paused.
We were mentioning earlier, Jeremy, that about 3% of the federal employees took this buyout. What is your advice to the others who may be contemplating doing the same? I mean, would you tell them to accept the package or stay put and hope the legal process plays out in their favor?
You know, it's a frightening proposition. I would imagine a lot of people, especially those who voted for Trump and sort of on the Super Bowl theme, are playing a little Monday morning quarterback because no one expected that the magnitude of the shrinkage, if you will, and so aggressively mandated or attempted would happen. This fork in the road policy that Elon Musk did with Twitter back when he had it initially as Twitter before it was X was really not something that was expected. So, would I tell him to leave or would I tell him to stay? I don't want to be the bearer of that news one way or another, but it's a hard thing to take and a hard step to make to lose that job now or even accept that package. You may not have that job down the road, but I think the courts will say this is not the way to do it.
Okay. And you were mentioning this just a moment ago about the implications for those who remain and, new performance standards that they might be held to. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, so as part of this email, they were told that there would be new performance standards. There would be a loyalty. You have to say that you're loyal. Now, I don't know if that's loyal to Donald Trump or loyal to the Constitution, which these federal employees are taking oath to uphold in their respective roles. So I don't know about what they will do about that. So there's a lot of uncertainty what this is going to mean, and it's not laid out completely in full. You would like to think they're going to keep on doing whatever they're doing before, but you don't know if they're going to move to another position, taking a whole new responsibility. The big question and concern I think is out there is, how are these jobs going to be done? You can't just take in a vacuum, get rid of all of these people and expect Social Security to get paid. Does it get privatized? Again, national security. There's so many things at play here.
Yeah, how does government function with all these layoffs? Quickly, I mean, it doesn't seem like there really has been any consideration for the law, especially when it comes to Trump's end game. I mean, what do you think his end game is? Is it partially what we're seeing now with Trump and Musk having instilled so much chaos and confusion as they barrel ahead with gutting these federal agencies?
You know, it's interesting. One of the things that they're arguing, the Department of Justice, that this should go forward is if we now take it back, it creates so much uncertainty. That's one of the things that the lawyer said. Uncertainty is what Donald Trump is thriving on. And I think part of this is a win no matter what. Whether or not the courts say you can or you can't do this, Trump is creating that chaos. Trump is sending that alarm, arguably telling some of these employees, you're lazy. We don't want you. We don't need you. He's indirectly getting the results he wants, telling people to leave and putting everyone on notice within government. Whether he can or he can't, he's going to make the effort to do what he wants to do. And that's a really significant and serious message and a frightening one for many.
It sure is. Jeremy Saland, appreciate your time. Thank you.
There are